100% of people there are exactly like that.
Of course they are.
I'm proud to be there, enjoy living there.
And they're probably harassed by all this goes on.
Yeah, but it kind of, it's not going on all the time. These are like isolated incidents.
I mean, I know I shop sometimes in Broadway, which is because I'm sort of go down there because a couple of banks there and it's a bit quieter than Old Swan if you want to go to a bank. And it's fine. You don't get any sense of being threatened or lots of strange skulking people around. It isn't like that.
No, it's not like that at all.
So it's not like that.
No, it's not like that at all. And I think basically, we just need to emphasise the majority experience of people living in the area.
Okay, so in your other life, you're a regeneration consultant supporting organisations working in the third sector. Is that right?
I am.
What does that mean? Have to explain to me. I don't quite understand what that is.
Well, basically, I've worked with for many years with voluntary and community organisations, and either in 3 or 4 different ways. So either helping them to secure funding, to help them tender for contracts for delivering training or other sort of building contracts, all that kind of thing, and support their development of particular projects that they might have. They might be building projects, they might be a training project, so that the community development elements. So it's a whole various sort of range of things.
So have you done that for a long time? I mean,
I've done it. Well, when I came back from my travels in Kazakhstan and then my tour, and then I was
young Tom Cruise days.
I'm travelling around Central Asia to write a travel guidebook, which never got published.
Was this like a year off? Was this a sabbatical, or were you writing as well?
No, I was off for a year. I was going to.
How long ago was that? 2002, was it?
No. It was 1990, 91.
Oh, right.
So I was there.
Far away,
yeah. Well, I was there when for the coup. The Soviet Union coup, and actually was in the town, which is Almaty as it's called now, that where all the sort of leaders of the republics with Gorbachev and Yeltsin all met to disband the Soviet Union. So I was there when the Soviet Union was broken up, and then I went to China.
No, the wall turned down.
Right. So you were actually there, right, for purpose of writing?
No,
or you were there for other reasons and got caught up in it?
No,
it's just a year off.
I was taking a year off, and I was going to travel.
Yeah.
But was that before you started your career as a regeneration consultant?
I've been working as a community development worker before then.
Right.
I've been working in Bootle, been there for 4 years. So, and I just wanted a break and travel for a bit. So. That opportunity came, and that's what I ended up doing.
Okay, so we've sort of got a bit about your background here, but actually you're actually quite a political person, and you have written a book. Now, your brother, I think, is Savile Kushner. He's a professor of public evaluation at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. Is that economically based?
No, he's a professor of research and education. So he's been doing that since the 1970s, really. So he worked at what's called the Centre for Applied Research and Education in the University of East Anglia, and it was a very progressive, innovative unit that was developing democratic evaluation, particularly around education. And he sort of continued doing the same thing, really. But
so you really come from quite a political background, don't you? In the sense you've always been understanding of politics. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it was always
there's always that in the household.
Oh yeah, there was always. And
were you born in Liverpool?
I was born in Liverpool, but we moved when I was 3. My father was a chemist, and his shop went bust, went bankrupt. So in Liverpool.
Yeah.
So they decided
to move. That's hard to do, being a chemist, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And they moved to Bristol, so where he had a job. So we moved. So when I was 3, we moved down to Bristol.
So that's where you were brought up.
I brought up in Bristol, and then I came back to Liverpool when I went to Liverpool Polytechnic, as it was.
Okay, so that's the connection.
Yeah.
So you're thinking and talking presumably at home and in your personal life about politics, and then it leads to this where you become a councillor.
Yes.
We've also written a book called Who Needs the Cuts? Now, you've just been down to the Labour Party conference to promote this, I know, and I have read it in the past. I haven't recently, but I did very briefly. I mean, and I put this to you before. What I took from the video I saw on YouTube was that the way forward is not to punish people or austerity measures, but to reinvest and create more people who are working, and then from that taxed income, then we'll be able to rebuild. And anyway, it's probably cyclical, so it's all going to come back anyway. Is that pretty much what you're saying?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make easy for the listener to understand.
Well, I think basically you can't reduce the deficit until you get people back in work, because just in very simple terms, the reason why we have a deficit, which is a deficit, is the difference between what the government earns in its income, which is mainly through taxation, and what it spends on schools and hospitals and housing, whatever. The reason why there's that difference is not because public spending has gone up, it's because the income to government's gone down because so many people are unemployed.
Yeah.
So if you get people back in work, obviously people pay tax, they stop claiming benefits. The difference between your income and your ingoings and outgoings balances, and then that's how your deficit goes, it reduces.
But we know this from the past. I mean, this was like the New Deal, wasn't it? It was after the last war. Can't remember it.
Pre-war.
Pre-war,
yeah.
Or was that pre-war? Was that for the 30s?
Roosevelt, yeah, 30s,
yeah. So was it Truman after the other?
No, anyway, it was Roosevelt.
It was Roosevelt, okay. So that was the New Deal. So a bit like Williamson Tunnels, where they set people tasks, and that puts usually men, back to work in large numbers. And then from that, it regenerates the economy. And I think, to me, and probably to people like me, because I'm left of centre, that would seem the most common sense way to do things. Why do you think this is happening with this Tory coalition?
Well, in the book, a quote, an interview that Margaret Thatcher gave to the Sunday Times in 1981, where she said that economics was the method, the objective was the heart and soul. And what she meant by that was that they set their political stall out. They had, based on the values that they had, which was to let the market be as free as possible, to allow people to generate as much wealth and earn as much as they could, that was and to reduce the spending of the welfare state and of government, and they found an economic policy that helped them deliver their political values. So I think that's what we're seeing now. So I think we're seeing.
But so they're in your view then, their political values is for. It's for people to get richer. And Margaret Thatcher used to believe in a trickle-down theory, which never worked.
No.
It didn't happen.
No.
Probably because there's no philanthropists left, mostly. There was a moral underbase to those days when people used to tie things, or the Gladstones of this world, or the Langdons. They were all big families. The Roths wasn't around, not Rothschilds, but something like that. Rathbones.
Yeah.
They had like a Quaker or probably a Presbyterian background. So they naturally, when they got to a certain level of wealth, then put it back into the community. that's how Liverpool was built. But that didn't happen in the 80s, did it?
No, but it didn't. I don't think it happened then. If you look at when we were fighting the Boer War, and when we were recruiting.
Now that was in South Africa in the end of the 18th century.
Late 18th century, so
19th century.
1890, something like that, right?
Yes.
So when we were doing that, and then we were recruiting people from poor communities, the government at the day realised that people were too ill and unhealthy to fight as soldiers. Joseph Rowntree did a lot of research at that time, and realised that the only way of correcting that was to bring in some form of sort of state health care, and that's really where things start. So I think all the changes and innovations in social welfare in terms of health and housing, have all come about in response to the needs and the requirements of our citizens.
Not just because it's the right thing to do.
There's for some people they need a reason, don't they? But so I think that it needs the state intervention to do that, because what the state at the end of the day will protect vulnerable people, should do in a civilised society.
I can agree with you that a lot, Barry. Experience I had the late 70s, the government in power prior to Margaret Thatcher ran skill centres.
Yeah.
Now they took over factories and they ran them as if they were factories, and people were being trained in various chosen skills, intensive training. My experience was I ended up in the best paying job I'd ever had, and then went into sort of my best period work-wise. When those skill centres disappeared, everything became harder, and it sort of then snowballed to the situation we've got now. It's like they backpedaled.
Yeah.
Instead of investing in people, they're, as you say, they're penalising them.
Yeah. Well,
am I getting off the subject here, or am I right?
Well, I think in the 1980s, the apprenticeships changed significantly, and there was actually, there were skills boards at the time, but they all went. So there were organisations in different sectors of the economy. They're trying to bring them back a bit now, but they were actually much more responsible for ensuring young people had a proper trade and were trained properly in those trades. I mean, the dash for apprenticeships now, is trying to replace a lot of the damage that was done in the 80s.
Well, the manufacturing went at the same time, didn't it?
Exactly.
But the other side of that, with the modern apprenticeships, there's, I've been talking to a few people about this. They're using modern apprentices as cheap labour.
Yeah.
They're going in and they're training them for the job, and then once the subsidies for the apprentices are ending, the people are then back out of work again without sufficient experience to actually go into another job.
I mean, I'm sure that is happening. I don't know how much that's happening, but I think, I think it's one thing passing the money on as wage subsidies, I think, which is fine, and I agree with that. And in work, I encourage and help organisations do that. But I think on the other side of it is to make sure that businesses and employers aren't exploiting that situation to the cost of individual young people, so that shouldn't happen.
I watched a programme quite recently about Germany. Of course, it's got a very vibrant economy. I mean, they've probably all been hit by the credit crunch anyway, but when somebody went over there, a reporter doing a documentary, and lived as a German person would live, who was working in industry. Yeah. Now, there are only people... The level at which he was working wasn't as a manager or somebody in high technical capacity. It was someone who was working probably in a reasonably skilled occupation, but on the shop floor. And it took me back to the time when people like worked for the Meccano here, in Edge Lane and Craft in Kirby. And that still exists. They've never let that go in Germany. But it's quite patriarchal. It's quite masculine as well. They look, even though they've got a German woman chancellor, they keep them a bit like you were talking about before the Roundtree. They're all looked after.
Yeah.
They don't buy their own houses. Most of them live in apartments and they're rented. There's no progression that way, so there must be a lot of disposable income. They don't seem to do that. There's a lot of discipline. The discipline on that shop floor, a lot of our people wouldn't accept that. That's very German discipline. But they have never changed that. It was broken down here, that system. Yeah. And I think that's what we're seeing now as well. Because it was all put over to financial services, wasn't it? Yeah, and I think there was that, and this phrase, having a flexible workforce, is an interesting one, isn't it? And I think it's basically, I mean, the most flexible workforce you can possibly have is one where you have no contractual agreement with your staff. 0 hours. So you have 0 hours. You can hire and fire people. You call them in by text message on the day you want them to come in. Don't bring them in tomorrow if you don't need them. And that's the system that's broken. That's why the unions started, because that used to happen at the dock gate. Exactly. On the docks here. Exactly. Where all men, it was a terribly demeaning thing. They'd line up in the morning and it was chosen as casual labour. And I mean, one of the features of the German industrial scene is that they do value and encourage and work very closely with trade unions, and that's been broken. I think when you break that in the workplace, the vast majority of trade union activity is around creating stable working environments for people, as well as good terms and conditions. Well, that's right, but I think if they probably think it's probably like, I mean, I know my father worked in the lab at Kraft, and of course they were an American company. They didn't particularly believe in unions, but they had a workplace committee. Yeah. And it worked. It wasn't just a notional thing. It actually did provide valuable feedback. and things were all nipped in the bud before they started, and they had very, very good working practices there and health and safety. And I